Welcome. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church. Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Dr. Aija Duelm. I'm a minister of this congregation. We strive to be an inclusive congregation, and we welcome everyone who comes our doors, regardless of your identities, different complex experiences that you bring with us. Whoever you are, we're glad that you're here with us today. Some of us have been here for quite some time. Some of us are here maybe for the first time, maybe the few times that you're here. Welcome to this place. So let's join the worship. As our call to worship today, it comes from Sarah Stewart's words, to remember our promises. Bring who you are as you enter our church this morning. Bring your best self and your struggling self. Bring your mistakes and your triumphs. Bring your shortcomings and your recommitment to good. Bring yourself here and open your heart to beauty, to truth, to the door that is open to the presence of God. Here in this church, we are trying to walk together on a peaceable way, trying to hammer out division and hatred and all that separates one from another. We come together this morning as a church to bow our heads in prayer, to raise our voices in song, to remember our promises, and vow to live by them once again. Come, let us worship together. Have you ever made a mistake? Maybe one or two? I think if we're honest, we all have made a mistake. Sent the wrong email, said the wrong thing at the wrong time, mixed up our schedule, or maybe accidentally tripped over the steps, like here. And most of us probably still experience some struggle with failings or mistakes. We certainly have made some progress towards embracing the fact that we are not perfect, that we're still growing and developing and learning things. But it still doesn't come easy to us. Our culture and society has made it more difficult for us as well, because we receive messages and images of perfection all the time around us. The more we follow them, the more we fall into the traps of perfectionism. Expecting others to be perfect, expecting ourselves to be perfect parents in the eyes of everyone, to get it right every time, to be able to do it all regardless of whether our bodies are up for it or not. And so we find ourselves that we're judging our own selves harshly and possibly being harder on ourselves than we are on others. Well, unfortunately, our theology has contributed to this as well. We have embraced high theological anthropology, and these are fancy words, but it is a belief that humans are inherently good and have agency, the ability to act without any need of outside divine power to save themselves and their neighbors. A UU minister, Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd, writes these words in her book, After the Good News. This historically high theological anthropology of ours, our belief in the inherent goodness of human beings, our confidence in reason and self-culture and personal rectitude has set us up. Across racial and ethnic spectrums within the church, it has constructed an expectation that we are not only to perform our middle class, have it our together, I'm sorry for language, for one another, but that we will be transmogrified by our own performance into actually morally perfect people. Liberal religious people not only tend to believe that we are called to perfection, but we also believe that we are already basically perfect, already basically converted, and already basically blessed. Unquote. So, when we believe that we are supposed to be able to get it right every single time, that we are continuously perfect and possibly already perfect, we have a problem when we make a mistake. But how did we get there as you use? And here is a brief historical perspective. It is all because of Methodists. Well, let me explain. And this will be heady, so please bear with me. It's just a brief section. If you think about back in the history, there was a time with the Second Great Awakening that started around 1800 and gained its momentum in 1820, and which was also a very formative time for Unitarians. This awakening moved forward the theology, Armenian theology, that said that a person can be saved through repentance and conversion. So it's in contrast to the theology that was existing at the time, that was Calvinist theology, that said humans are completely depraved and there's no hope for them, right? So in addition to this possibility that humans can change, repent, and they also said that that was not sufficient. Humans had to continue to work to achieve salvation, to continue to engage in morally good works, to better the society, to better themselves. This is the Wesleyan teaching, the perfect love, that emphasized that personal and social holiness. And we know from history that this idea, this thought, brought about many good social reforms. There was temperance movement, women's rights, abolition of slavery, prison and care for mentally ill reform that was coming about because people started to care about the social environment and what that looked like. So this awakening had a profound effect on Congregationalists, and those are those Unitarian folks. And we have some founding members of that faith who were Christian perfectionists. The two most notable of them, William Ellery Channing and Andrew Norton. Some of you might be familiar with these names. So Channing's one of the most famous speech called Unitarian Christianity rejected Trinity. So now that we don't have three gods, Channing had to deal with Jesus. And the way he dealt with Jesus was publishing a sermon called Likeness to God to explain that every human being has the potential to reach divine heights by perfecting themselves and becoming like God. So, because that's what example of Jesus showed in Channing's view. So this theology is 200 years old, and it still has some hold in our time. Even though we probably are more familiar with churches like the one in our reading, where things go wrong from time to time, where sometimes things go wrong all at once. I wonder if anything from the church's experience that you heard in the reading resonated with you. Any mistakes in the order of service, or starting the wrong section in worship, or any other events that are happening in this congregation. The congregational life has its ebb and flow, and sometimes things do not go perfectly. The thing is that if we approach our faith communities, our neighbors, our family, and friends from the stance of perfectionism, we will fail to value ours and others' contributions. We will lose joy and possibly distance ourselves from the ministry and the blessing we could have received, because we would just feel things were not right. We would become off-put by shortcomings of our members, community friends, ministers, staff, leaders, and may find ourselves being resentful. I do want to be clear that sometimes we can, and we do, and we have made mistakes that hurt others deeply. And these situations, these hurts, need to be addressed. There are mistakes that have grave consequences. And this is the reason there needs to be an accountability. Accountability from those in power, the leaders and ministers, and accountability among one another and the congregation as a whole. Since I am rather new to this congregation, I was sorting through the policies and procedures. You have a thick book on that one. And I came across something that you might find interesting. During a congregational meeting on January 25th, 2004, this church adopted a behavioral covenant. And you can read this on the slides. This is what you promised, the way you will behave with one another. To treat each other with genuine respect, to practice moral and mannered behavior, to be welcoming and open and honest with ourselves and sharing with others, to strive towards consensus, to deal with conflict directly, face to face, voice to voice, to improve ourselves, our process, and our policies. Well, you committed to these behaviors a long time ago, and if you're visiting here, new to this congregation, sorry if this is a surprise to you. The many churches and the wider UUA continues to work on what the congregational accountability looks like. Because there's so many congregations that have hurt their own members, their ministers, their staff. And if the congregation seeks to be healthy, there are some behaviors that should not be tolerated. Bullying, harassment, and any other form of violence should not be tolerated in a congregation. However, it does require courage to confront such behaviors. It requires vulnerability to open up and share that you were hurt. Because you're putting yourselves out, trusting that you will not get hurt again by sharing that, your experience. It also takes courage to admit and to first hear that somebody experienced your behavior as hurtful, And then to admit that that behavior was wrong and not the right one. And to commit in your heart to change the behavior. Without courage to do so, the community suffers. And we do need a way to be able to come together and connect with one another if we are to be honest, in honest relationship with one another. So if you still, after hearing all this, expect your faith community to be perfect, I have news for you. There will be things that will not go perfectly. No matter how much effort we put into them, how hard we try, even if when people do their best, they show up when they're needed, they share when they are able, they pour their hearts into their commitments, some efforts will not turn out to be perfect. There is a Japanese art called Kintsugi. It is known as the art of repairing the broken pottery. What they do is they take a broken piece, whether it's a bowl or a glass or a pot, and sometimes, so when it's broken, they put pieces together and they put gold in the places where the crack was or the broken side was. And they make this as a beautiful art work that shows the history of this vessel, right? It's a philosophy that treats breakage and repair as not something to disguise and hide, but to lift up as something beautiful and with a historical meaning. Some collectors have become so enamored by this art form that they have been accused by deliberately smashing valuable pottery so that it could be replaced with some gold seams of kintsugi. So just think about when you look around. I know this place has been repainted and redecorated, but there still might be some cracks or flaws that you might see around yourself when you walk around. A scratched mirror, an overgrown wildflower garden with a few weeds since we had some rains, a crumbling old castle that you might see on your trips, a really well-loved and worn-out baby blanket, a desk or table that is marked from its use. Each of these have brought a gift or a blessing of love, of learning, of beauty. And it's the same with our flaws and our imperfections. Brené Brown, in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, identifies 3 gifts that come to us because of our imperfections. And these are courage, compassion, and connection. And as I said earlier, it takes courage to share that vulnerability with others when you're hurt or when you're being the one hurting another person. The second gift, compassion, is possible only because we know our own pain, and that helps us identify with others when they are hurting. We can relate and imagine of what that hurt might feel like, because in our own lives we have experienced pain and hurt. So we can be compassionate and at the same time hold people accountable. We can confront someone about their behavior, execute consequences for their wrongdoings, without putting people down. And the last gift that Brené Brown names is that these experiences connect us. There is an energy between people when they feel that they were seen, they were heard, they were valued. When they can give and receive without judgment. That brings a connection between the people. So these gifts, courage, compassion, and connection, they only work when they are exercised. So I challenge us to look for these gifts among us and share them with one another. And who knows, maybe we will discover even more gifts. I would like to invite us to join in a brief ritual. Because I believe that worship is not only about mind, it is about all of ourselves engaging in the thing that we're talking about and hearing about. Ushers have baskets with rocks, and if you could start and pass them around, I ask you that you pick one rock and take it with you, hold it. As you're holding the rock in your hand, I invite you to think about your mistakes, flaws, imperfections that you think you have, that you care about, things that you may have recently done or sometime long ago that you struggle with. A flaw, an imperfection, and put it in that rock.
Can we have rocks?
You will have rocks. You will have rocks. So once you have put your imperfection in the rock, I want you to now look at it again. I've noticed some of you were examining your rock earlier. But notice what your rock looks like. Is there anything that looks beautiful? Maybe there are some cracks or something that shapes it to be very unique, very distinct, and that gives it its beauty. I will invite you all to come forward and place your rock on this table. This will be our altar for today. Bring your rock with your imperfections in it to this table. So may these rocks, these pebbles that we placed here, remind us that these are gifts that we each share with one another that make this community beautiful.